Great. Our next speaker is Eleanor from Suffolk County Council, who coordinates projects to increase recycling rates and waste, particularly food waste. So I'll hand over to you now, Eleanor, to share your screen.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Eleanor. So I work at Suffolk County Council in the waste and recycling team. And yeah, I work on projects to help with waste reduction and reuse. And I work a little bit on food waste as well. So I'm going to talk a bit about food waste and composting and kind of what you can do in schools. So yeah, just going to talk a bit about food waste, why it's a problem, food waste in schools specifically, food waste recycling, some resources that we've got coming up later this year, a bit on our master composters and what they might be able to do to help, and a bit on other waste and recycling education that we can offer to schools as well. So yeah, what's the problem basically? I'm sure lots of you are probably aware, but food waste around the globe now is at a shockingly high figure. So it's about 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted across the globe every year. And then more locally, that translates to about 10 million tons in the UK, and 6 million tons of that does come from households. We get a lot of people telling us, oh, but it's the supermarkets, they're wasting lots of food, and they are wasting lots of food, but actually the majority of food waste in the country does come from the household. So it's really important that we kind of try and talk to people about what they can do to try and minimize that. And then even more locally in Suffolk alone, we have about 54,000 tons of food going into the bins every year, which is a really big a number and something that we really want to try and reduce. And if food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest emitter of carbon emissions. So that's been a figure that's been worked out. So it really does have a big impact on climate and on carbon emissions as well. So that's just kind of to give you a bit of background there. Yeah, so if people in the UK stop wasting food, the impact would be the equivalent of, so just have a little think, is it 1 in 10 cars off the road, 1 in 5, or 1 in 20? So it's actually 1 in 5 cars. If people stop wasting food, it would be the same as taking 1 in 5 cars off the road. So it would actually have a huge impact on carbon emissions and climate change. More locally again, so food waste actually accounts for 34% of total waste disposed. So in your normal black rubbish bin at home, a third of that on average is food waste. And 14,000 tons of that is unopened food, so food that hasn't even come out of its package. So it's a lot more than we often think, because obviously once it's in the bin, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And then, yeah, more specifically to everyone on the call, food waste in schools. So RAP found that in one academic year in primary schools alone, they wasted 68,000 tons of food. Secondary schools a little bit less, but still 28,000. So a total amount of 96,000 tons from all schools across the UK of food gets wasted in one academic year. So again, it's a problem across schools as well as in households. However, in a more positive note, they found that most food waste in both school settings was avoidable. So when we talk about food waste, we talk about avoidable and unavoidable food waste. So your unavoidable food waste being things like your apple peels, your peelings, coffee grounds, tea bags, eggshells, things that you can't avoid. It's not stuff that we eat, and it's stuff that we do dispose of. But then the avoidable food waste is all the leftovers on the plate, food that has gone in the bin that hasn't been opened. So some of the highest offenders are things like slices of bread, pints of milk, all going down the drain. So yeah, there's a lot that we can do. Next slide, Jess. Thank you. So what can be done about it? So we have a schools waste management toolkit, which talks about lots of things that schools could do about waste reduction in schools. And if you would like a copy of that, you can contact me. And in that resource, we've got a few suggestions on what you can do to target food waste. Things like conducting a food waste audit to just actually work out how much is being thrown away. It's really important to start with kind of getting a starting point to know what you need to do about it. And we have a fab foods resource pack that helps you deliver an audit that's being reviewed, and I'm going to talk a bit about that more later. Other things about working with your caterers to reduce plate waste at lunchtime. Is there things that can be done to kind of tweak menus, to talk about kind of what food the children are going to eat, offering smaller portions, and then if they're still hungry, going to get more rather than giving them more and they don't quite eat it all. Um, Involving parents in food waste, talking to them about it because it kind of helps strengthen action in school. And we have our Food Savvy campaign, which is to tackle food waste at home. We've got a website where we have lots of tips and recipes for people to help them reduce food waste at home. And then finally, composting. And I know obviously that's what kind of Damien was talking about, what they've done at their school, kind of setting up composting at school to deal with that sort of unavoidable food waste, your veg peelings, your tea bags, your coffee grounds, things like that as a way of kind of reducing that food waste on school site. So that's just a few things that we kind of talk about. And yeah, we can send a copy of that to anyone that's interested. Next slide. Thanks, Jess. Another really useful resource is high-speed training, which I know many of you might be aware of. They do lots of training courses. They have got a very interesting article on 10 ways to reduce food waste at school. And a link to that is in the waste management toolkit I've just mentioned. And again, they talk about doing waste audits, educating students, staff, running sort of competitions, making it a bit more competitive. I know that particularly works in maybe a primary school setting, kind of getting the school, getting the pupils engaged. If it's possible, starting a sort of vegetable garden or some sort of growing. And I know the next speaker is going to talk a bit more about that. Yeah, working with your caterers and getting them to talk about portion sizes, perhaps for different year groups, thinking how much in reality can they eat, and is there a way to let them get more food if they need it? Being a bit more flexible in the menu planning, staggering lunch times and using up leftovers. So that's another great resource to go away and have a look at. Thanks, Jess. And as well, I'm sure you'll all be aware, but as of March last year, all schools are now required to separate food waste for recycling, and all schools should now be doing that. Whether you are or not, I'm not obviously don't know. And if you don't have that in place, then you need to contact your waste collection provider to discuss your options. However, and food waste recycling is great. It's a great way to deal with especially that unavoidable food waste, but it does cost your school money. And I'm very aware that schools are under a lot of budget pressures. And so reducing your food waste will reduce your number of collections, which will save you money. For example, in Baber and Mid Suffolk, I think it costs about £8 a collection. So, and obviously every penny counts. So yeah, the more we can do to reduce food waste on school site, the better. Thanks, Jess. And then finally, we've got a Fab Foods resource coming in June this year. It does currently exist, but it's having a really good refresh. It's a resource mainly aimed at primary schools, and it's a way of engaging your school community in reducing food by conducting an audit of how much food waste. And it's going to be a great way to kind of, yeah, get your school community involved in tackling the issue. And there'll be a kind of an assembly on food waste reduction and recycling and lots of activities to go alongside that. So that's going to be around in June, and we will circulate that either through this network or through our Food Savvy website. So keep an eye out for that, because that could be a really useful ready-made resource for you and other staff to get involved with. And then, yeah, finally, composting. So composting at school is a fun and educational way to manage small amounts of food. And by setting up a composting area, you can kind of help reduce food and the food collections from your school. We have a discount scheme via our website on Suffolk Recycling, where you can get discounts for compost bins. So if you wanted to set up a composting area, we have got that facility available. We also have a few master composter volunteers who are very knowledgeable about compost and enthusiastic, and they may be able to visit your school to kind of provide educational sessions and give you some support on getting started with composting. There's lots more information about that on our website, or you can email my colleague Craig, and his email address is on the slide there in front of you. So that's another way to kind of get your school engaged in food waste and where it goes. And obviously, as Damien spoke about initially, it's a great way of linking to lots of areas of the curriculum in terms of the eco club, or the science might want to get involved. So it has lots of cross-curricular links, which can be really a really good way to get the children engaged. Thanks, Jess. And then finally, we do have a number of waste and recycling officers that work across the district and borough councils that can come into school and offer kind of free waste and recycling workshops and talks and assemblies. And we have done several of these, particularly on food waste, recycling and food waste reduction. If your school is in Mid Suffolk, we have a education officer called Samantha Oldfield, who's fantastic and really keen and eager to get into schools to talk everything waste and recycling. So she would love to hear from you. But if your school is in the rest of the county, please contact myself and I can put you in touch with someone. We've got officers in all the district councils, but they're not always all specifically education officers. So yeah, if you get in touch with me, I can sort of pass your request on to the relevant person, and we'd love to kind of come into your schools and work with you. We don't have sort of off the shelf resources because we kind of design things bespoke to the school. So whatever the school kind of wants, we can kind of tailor our visits to what you need really. So we're happy to kind of work with you on that to make it something useful to you and your students. Thanks, Jess. And that's the end of my presentation. I sort of whizzed through that because I'm conscious it's the end of a long day for many of you. So, and we've got another speaker. But yeah, any questions, either ask me now, pop it in the chat, or email me after, and I'll be happy to help. But thank you for listening.
Great, thanks, Eleanor. There's some really useful stuff in there, and hopefully people can definitely make use of the school visits and the other resources. I've put the links in the chat you talked about so people can use those email addresses. And we've just got a question from Evie who said, is the master composting course free to attend?
So the Master Composters is a volunteer scheme. So we have a number of volunteers. Do you mean to come into school? Is that free? Is that what you mean, Evie? Just so I'm clear.
No, I was thinking more that I would like to become a master composter.
Ah, fantastic. Well, Craig is actually on the line. So I don't know if you want to take this question, Craig.
Yeah, apologies. I was lurking in the background. I missed the start of the presentation. I didn't think I'll be back in time, but I did. So I have been listening in the background. Yes, we've got training for master composters Friday, the 20th of March. It is free. It does require a certain amount. There's a certain almost like well, it's a honorary 30-hour target we'd like volunteers who we've trained up to be able to give that time up, promoting composting in a wide range of whether it's events, etc., and so on. In terms of, unfortunately, I don't think we can fill the course with people who are specifically wanting to put composting into the schools. The idea is we train up volunteers who then may be able to go into schools and other community groups to support them and help them get started with composting. So in terms of what we'd at some point in the future we'd really like to be able to do a similar course specifically for teachers and invite teachers along to be able to take away those skills and then apply those to their own schools and the school settings. But if you want to drop me an email, we could perhaps have a discussion about getting a current volunteer or a newly trained volunteer into the school to maybe push that. But indeed, if resources weren't the issue, we'd love to be able to provide, specifically a schools-based training course for staff, and hopefully we'll be able to do something along those lines in the future. But this is really specifically for people to go on and then support the communities around them, rather than just one specific organisation. If that makes sense, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
cheers.
I'll drop you an email. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Craig. And I think we've got another question in the chat from Caroline, who asks, do the master composters have DBSs for when they're coming into the schools?
To be honest, they don't. And in fact, we've been running the course for, I think it's 19 years now. And all the time, we have been going into schools throughout that time. And I think in that time, we've only actually been requested DBS checks once. And that's so originally when the scheme set up, we had all volunteers DBS checked, regardless of whether they're going to be going to schools or not, and the cost of that was prohibitive. So subsequently we haven't done that. But if schools have asked for a volunteer, a GBS checked volunteer, we've usually been able to find one, because again, we have volunteers who have DBS checks through their other roles in life. What we always say is that we wouldn't want a volunteer to be in a school and doing an activity or an education session without teachers or teaching assistants present at all times. So essentially that has never really become an issue. But again, it does depend on the individual policies and approaches of schools. So yeah, so the short of it is, if you wanted somebody to come in who was DBS checked, we could arrange that, but it isn't done as standard. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Craig.